Hello and welcome back to the AFL High Performance Podcast. My name is Jack McLean. I'm your host, and today I'm lucky enough to be joined by Emily Smith. We'll be discussing everything that you need to know that when it comes to optimizing your foot function, a very important aspect of the body for high performing athletes and athletes at all levels. So if you're tuning in, parents of young athletes, obviously athletes themselves, and you've got any questions, you're tuning in live, feel free to use the comment section below. But welcome, Emily. Thanks for jumping on for this chat.
Thanks, Jack. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously important topic, but I don't think it's one we've actually shared in great detail on the show
Mm.
so far. So really exciting to share obviously tips and tricks for athletes listening in, but also
Mhm.
practitioners as well.
Yep.
But if we start with your, I guess, journey so far in your career, where did it all start? What made you choose
Mm.
podiatrist as a career path? Yeah.
So I was a hockey player. Played at quite a high level of hockey, and had compartment syndrome, like a lot of hockey players experience shin pain of any description, but a lot of hockey players do end up with compartment syndrome. And it was just something that I just couldn't get under control. I couldn't, I saw all sorts of practitioners, and it was in the end something that really did limit me from taking sort of the next um, step as far as, moving up in was spending a lot more time at more of that elite level. I ended up just playing more of sort of first grade in Sydney because my legs just couldn't handle the additional load that was required in more of that sort of New South Wales level and above. So I did play for New South Wales, but yeah, I sort of decided that I couldn't keep up with it. So that was the main driver for my. I was looking at podiatry or osteopathy were the two degrees that I was looking at, and I chose podiatry because it was 4 years rather than 5 years, and I didn't have to pay
Yep.
for a postgrad degree. I had no money, and so that was how I got into podiatry, and I just loved it. Like from the very get go, I felt like certainly the biomechanical side of things, it really, I understood it. I could see things really clearly that I felt that maybe other people couldn't see. And so it was then how I got into, my first year out of uni, I went back to my hometown to work for a year just to cut my teeth on podiatry. And then I actually got offered to buy into one of Sydney, like it was Sydney's biggest sports medicine centre, still is Sydney's biggest sports medicine centre at Olympic Park, just above the Institute of Sport there. So I actually became a partner at 22 there. And so I was quite green, but I was able to utilise a lot of the highly regarded and highly experienced practitioners that worked from there, lots of sports doctors, physiotherapists, sports scientists that I was able to really tap into their knowledge. And it really shaped my path. And I think really resonated more with me and what I was seeing clinically compared to really what I was taught. So I was taught what they called root theory back then, which was all about sort of stopping pronation. And I was seeing people who were coming through my door for second and third opinions with 3 pairs of orthotics that didn't help. And they were all very hard orthotics. At that point in time, it was sort of a polypropylene device that had no movement in it. And they just weren't working. And I was like, well, there's got to be another way around this. And thankfully, at that point in time, the technology started to change as far as the manufacturing of orthotics was concerned. And we went from hand making orthotics to being machine milled, which meant that we could turn something that was really thick and hard into something that was thin and springy. And that was really how, 20 years ago that we were doing springy orthotics, and nobody else was doing anything less than sort of a 3 mil poly device. And we were doing 2 mil poly devices that were really springy. And it certainly shaped all of that kind of together. I think the main thing really was having that platform in a sports medicine center where we were seeing elite athletes, novice athletes, anybody who wanted to be moving better and were in pain. That was sort of the springboard for me. And then from there, the opportunities that came from there from a sports perspective and working with teams, and that sort of all evolved. But yeah, it's a bit of a different journey to maybe compared to a lot of podiatrists. And but yeah, the main thing really was having that sports medicine influence very, very early.
Yeah, yeah, sounds like a great hub
Mm.
early on to sort of form your philosophy and processes. Were there some people that were strong influences or mentors, if you like, that sort of stand out front of mind?
Yeah, yeah. So Dr. Donald Quar is probably one who he really did. I guess from a business point of view as well, because he was a partner with me. He was the director at that point in time, and he helped me from a business point of view, but also from a clinical point of view. Dr. Scott Byrne as well, really sort of put a lot of faith in me as a young green podiatrist, and I really learnt from, you're sort of they people who had seen them first and then they have their diagnosis and they kind of working their way backwards. I really worked out how we fit into the picture of that sports medicine world, and also gave me the pathway forwards as well when I was seeing people and we weren't quite getting the results that we would expect. Then I had that nice pathway up through the medical sports doc route. So I think those two practitioners particularly really helped me. Who else? Certain physios like David Bick, who was the Wallabies physio at that point in time. I worked really closely with him. Yeah, lots and lots of like really great physios and practitioners that just, I think we had we used to call it a think tank, and we would go and have everybody that was kind of the young guns in at City Sports Medicine Centre would get together on a regular basis, and we would do a think tank, and that was quite pivotal as well. And learning how everybody fits together, where my role was, physio's role, and also discussing cases and kind of working out, how a physio would manage something, and then where I sort of fit into that picture. And if somebody didn't quite need physio, but I could kind of help them with that more of the loading sort of pathways and whatever else. So yeah, it wasn't so much podiatrist as like Trent, my husband, is also a podiatrist. He had graduated a year before me, so he helped me in those early years as well. Just being that sounding board, definitely. But I think for both of us, it was really other disciplines that really shaped sort of who we are as clinicians and how we look at things.
Yeah, the think tank's
Mm.
a great concept for workplaces to share. Was
Oh,
that a weekly catch up or was it more informal
can't,
sort of?
I can't remember. It was if it wasn't fortnightly, it was monthly. I can't remember. It definitely wasn't weekly. I think we were a bit too busy for that, but I think it was fortnightly, and then we kind of maybe depending on sort of people's schedules had it every month or so, but it eventually fizzled out. But it was really good for a good sort of 18 months or so. We did that quite consistently.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned earlier the challenges of sort of rigid orthotics and where the technology has grown, and
Mm.
how Olympic Park was sort of ahead of its time. What was some other challenges that you sort of faced over your career that you've learnt from and
Uh,
maybe changed your process or philosophy?
yeah. So I think the other main challenge that we have as podiatrists is we're working with people's footwear, right? So, you're working in the realms of a running spike or a football boot and, pair of sandals, whatever it would be, fashion. So that really did, it was a challenge, but it was a challenge accepted on my part. I ended up creating an off-the-shelf device that works beautifully in really slim, shallow shoes that sticks in. And it was basically kind of like a lowest common denominator support system that is quite balanced. It's got support both medially and laterally, which is sort of, it then suits most foot postures and most sports as well. So I did a lot of research into that and developed that. So that's kind of managed more of the open footwear and the really slim footwear. Now we're also doing 3D printed orthotics, which means that we can really sort of make whatever we need with the densities that we need, the thickness that we need. And that's been a major game changer in the last 6 months as well.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
things
definitely.
definitely technology wise have worked in our favor. But yeah, they're probably the main things. And then I guess we sort of don't fit a lot of the time, the physios and other well, I guess more physios will probably do a lot of the podiatry role in a club form, managing blisters, that sort of thing. So we do a lot of our consultation out of the club. But I've had some really awesome experiences where we've been really deeply involved with the club. So I worked for the New South Wales Swifts for 3 or 4 years, and they had me heavily involved in the club, and that was really quite cool. And now I work for the WTA, so I do the top 200 women's tennis players, and I travel with them, and I'm heavily involved in a lot of the cases that are lower limb cases. And so I think that's changing a little bit as well, like the perception of where a podiatrist role is within those more elite teams and sporting environments. And they're probably, I guess it's not so much a challenge, but it's more just a slight restriction from a profession point of view.
Yep,
Yeah.
for sure. It's is there any sports around the world that have full-time podiatrists? I imagine bigger budget clubs.
Yeah. Well, I'm a full-time podiatrist for the WTA. So there's not many roles that have, for podiatrists in that sort of scope. But I'm on call 24/7 basically for any.
Right.
So we've got tournaments across the year throughout the world. So I travel where I can, and I do a lot of the main tournaments. But for everything else, I am on call, and I do a lot of telehealth type stuff. But then I also teach the physio. So I think we've got about 45 physios on our team. And I teach them how to basically do my role for when I'm not there. So that's a big part of my role, is to sort of manage that. So there's not many full-time podiatry roles within the sporting world and within clubs, but we certainly, I think, we're pulled in when we need to be pulled in from a club form, like at the Eels and netball and the Giants, and we do a lot of the different clubs. We get pulled in when we need to be pulled in, and we're there for screenings and whatever else pre-season. So I think we kind of, otherwise the physios can fill those gaps.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then
Yeah.
for those students listening in that are interested in the career path, obviously there's a lot of work in the private sector, and then as you build your sort of reputation, credibility, I imagine then you start to get elite sporting experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned this, Olympic Park. Was that on a like working for yourself, sort of subcontractor type setup, or was that a full-time employee? Or
So I bought in as a partner into the business, and so now I'm the managing director there. So, but I'm still only 1 day a week there. So we've got 2 clinics now, but we had 5 at one point in time. So we kind of, I like having diversity in my week and being in different locations, and I find that works best for my brain. And you're seeing different demographics of patients and athletes. You get different referral systems. You're working with different practitioners. So I've always had at least 2 clinics that I've worked out of. So my main clinic now is in Balmain at Biomechanics, which we've been open for 12 months. But yes, it's sort of, I like to spread my load and my weekly attention. And so the WTA is a part of that, and then my online business. And so I've kind of got a few different roles, wear quite a few hats.
Yeah, quite similar.
Yeah.
I feel with like sports psychologists, dietitians, a lot of the
Yes.
specialty roles. Yeah.
Yeah. You sort of, I think I think from a sports podiatry perspective, it's probably not the easiest thing to have a full-time load of sports podiatry patients. Like, you're not seeing people very often. You have to have quite a big referral network and a lot of word of mouth to make that work consistently. So I think if people are looking to get into sports podiatry, having different types of locations is probably the better way to do it. And you can fill those days very easily. Whereas if I was trying to fill 6 days in one location, we actually can do that here at Balmain. But there's not many, like, we've been working towards that for 20 years. So it's, it takes a long time to build that up.
To get there. What about like Australian Ballet? Is that a big space for podiatrists, or is it
It's
also educating physiotherapists in those positions?
Yeah. So I work with Bangarra Dance Theatre. So I do I similar but with the Indigenous dance group. Um, so I'm sort of pulled in when I need to be pulled in, and then I keep in good contact with their head physio. The Australian Ballet, I know the physio. I think they probably contract out when, like, if somebody's got blisters or calluses that need to be removed or something like that, they probably contract out to podiatrists in Melbourne for that. Um, I their head physio is extremely good with foot and ankle physio. So and I guess the other thing with the ballerinas is that they're in shoes that don't fit anything really. Like the type my off the shelf orthotic goes into them, so they're nice and flexible. They're made from a gel. They don't inhibit any point range of movement or anything like that. But in the most part, they're still going to be just in their ballet shoes unless they're rehabbing, and they're kind of recovering from an injury. And then once they've recovered, they wouldn't be wearing that necessarily anymore. So I know that they do utilize podiatry, but not in a full-time sense.
Yeah, yeah. And back to career, before we move into the key topic, but highlights, the sort of spring front of mind that you've experienced so far?
Oh, I think traveling with the WTA is absolutely just incredible. This year I went to Indian Wells, which is one of the main 1,000 events, and it's in Palm Springs, and it was incredible. And then I went off to Tampa and did a week of teaching after that. Last year I was at Wimbledon and did a week of teaching before that. I think that's probably, like, you're managing everybody that's in that training room, whoever needs any kind of foot care or advice, or I've done custom made shoes with them. I've worked with the brands to create custom made shoes with their top 10 players. So that's another career highlight. And then just generally working within that high level sport environment is just really, that's still, you would know it's still a buzz each time you walk into a club. It's, the environment is just really, really cool. So that's probably, from a elite sport perspective, they would be my career highlights. And then creating our own clinic. We've opened a clinic this time last year, and just having everything that we want in that clinic. And with our sort of, the design of it was really to kind of harness that training room feel. So it's quite integrative in the way that we do things. It's still very private. We've got private rooms, but having that integrative care is a big part of it, but also having it quite bespoke as well. So it's, some of the other the clinics are really big, whereas this we've kind of deliberately created to be quite small. So that was also definitely a big career highlight.
Yeah, that was beautiful space that you put together.
Yeah.
So I visited not long ago, and like I
Yeah.
said, straight away you could tell it was functional, with practitioners that want to apply their trade, but also just had a good feel to it as well.
Thank
Good
you.
barometer, I guess, on a Sunday when you had pretty much every staff member there on their Sunday. It's
We were doing our
hang
photo
around.
shoot. Well, no, it was a photo shoot, so we wouldn't normally be there on a Sunday. But yeah, it is. It's a good vibe.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's gives a good, wasn't the intention of the podcast anyway, but a good platform there to share, I guess, the journey towards someone that wants to climb the ladder of podiatrist and work around the globe and experience lots of different populations and challenges and reap the benefits of the rewards from facing those challenges. I guess for optimal foot function for athletes in the context of high performance sport, I imagine it must be a challenge, because we're all trying to make an impact with the athletes and get more time with the athletes, and trying to make change in our own perspectives. And they've got a lot of, I guess, different stresses that are going on at the one time. What do you feel like are some of the big rocks for, I guess, field-based athletes that are in boots, that your low-hanging fruit, if you like, to make significant change for foot health?
Yeah. So I think the main thing is really trying to optimize the trajectory of the foot through to the big first and second toe. So really, like, any of your calf raises, doing them properly so they're up through their first and second toe. And what that really does is creates that spring mechanism of the foot. So if you're rolling outwards, you'll lose that spring mechanism. If you're pushing up through that first and second toe, you're getting optimal stability, optimal power output, optimal acceleration. And then and the whole reason for that is because you're activating that whole foot and posterior chain to get you to be in that position to be able to push forward in that really nice safe zone. Whereas if you're rolling outwards at that push off phase of gait, then you're having to pull around it. So you're more moving into that anterior chain. So I think the biggest thing really is to be able to help, from my point of view, help people get through to that first and second toe, as long as they've got good first MTP joint, so their big toe joint has got enough range of movement. That's where they should be. If they don't have enough range of movement through their big toe, then that is a different story, and they will naturally be loading more onto the lateral side of their foot. And that's just something that we deal with through different modalities. Sometimes we stiffen up through the shoe, like not in a football boot, but say in a running shoe that have more of that rocker form to try and help facilitate going through that first and second toe rather than them needing to go laterally. But in the most part, having that range of movement, we want to get you through that first and second toe. And that means that then you've got your lateral ankle stabilizing muscles, so your perineal muscles. You've got your tib post, which is your arch muscle, able to do their own work. Whereas if you're naturally tipping laterally, we've got a little bit too much of that arch form and not enough on that lateral side. So we're imbalanced, and there's going to be a lack of stability there as they push off. So one of the things that came out of the research that I did was basically, we don't want people to be striking too far on that lateral side of their heel, which is what I was taught. So we want to have people striking more on that sort of central lateral position, and then getting them through towards their big toe. And that to get to their big toe, they're going to have to pronate a little bit. So they're going to have to roll in a little bit to get off through that first and second toe. Whereas when people go on that lateral side of their foot, they sort of strike really laterally, then they roll in too far because they have to get their big toe to the ground, then they tend to flip back out again. So there's a lot of lost energy there. There's a lot of torsion and a lot of instability, and you've got muscles overusing and underusing. So really, when we're sort of through that first and second toe, we've got everything working the way that it should in a really nice pulley form. So your lateral stabilizing muscles and your arch muscles are able to do their job properly. Your intrinsic foot muscles are able to engage properly. Your calf can engage properly, and we've got that nice push through. So, and then you're going to get that nice spring. So for me, it's about trying to balance somebody through to their first and second toe. And when people have got a foot that naturally rolls out too much or rolls in too much, my job is then to kind of like balance that up just enough to get them so that they're able to kind of bumper through to that big toe. And that's where often we will use a really nice springy orthotic to create that, to get them through to that nice trajectory.
Feels like runners, joggers are getting more and more support, just from just by looking around at what the boys are buying these days and all the different brands.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something to support the mechanics that you're talking about there with your research, or do you think it's going in the wrong direction, or what's your thought on current general footwear, I guess?
So they're not getting more supportive, actually. They're getting more stacked. So they're getting higher. So they're actually getting softer. And there's a lot of shoe foam now that is too soft. So it's like marshmallows. Yeah. So they have got a lot of shock absorption, a lot of good comfort, but then your foot it's like being on soft sand. So you've got a lack of stability there, and then that can create a lot of that imbalance as well, where your foot's kind of moving through further than where it should move through, and then the foot either has to try and rebalance or it just squishes through it. So so shoes overall are getting more stacked, which is that higher foam. They're getting lower in the heel pitch, so that heel to toe ratio, or that drop we call it, has gone from kind of an average of, say, 10 to 12. It's now like 6 to 8. So 8's one of the higher drops now. So that can in itself start to create issues around sort of calf loading and load through the plantar fascia and a lot of that sort of posterior chain, particularly if they don't have enough strength in those muscle groups and in that posterior chain, and also if they're not utilizing their foot properly. So like I say, a football boot, you've got like your ASICS football boots generally have like a 10 mil drop. So they've got almost like they've got a midsole in them. They're almost like a running shoe on studs. But then a lot of the other shoes are 0 drop. So so you kind of, got that difference there. And so a lot of the time when somebody's managing an injury, we will put somebody into that higher drop shoe like the ASICS because they're more structured. They have more of that drop. They have more support, and I say more support very much in inverted commas because they don't actually have support. They're just more structured. There's no shoe on the market that actually gives arch support, it's a bit of a myth. Sometimes they all use, and they're using this less and less, but so we used to use increasing density in the inside midsole of the shoe. So the midsole is on the inside edge. I should have had a shoe here. Damn, I don't have one. So I'll use a foot. So they used to have, like in the counters, they'd have like a big piece of chunky material here sitting in the midsole. But actually inside the shoe, it was all flat. So what used to happen is you'd come through in and you'd roll in, but then you couldn't go much further because you'd have an increase in density there. Now what they're doing is they're higher on the medial side, lower on the lateral side. So they actually are tipping people a little bit. So things are generally overall less supportive. They don't have arch support in them. The other big change that's happened in the last 10 years is the rocker sole. So it started with the Hokers. The Hokers have got that sort of rear foot and forefoot rocker. They look like a boat underneath. And they're designed to kind of rock you through that saddle plane where you're able to kind of move through your big toe without your big toe actually bending too much. So they work, and I actually think that a lot of the brands have done them a little bit better than the Hokers, and I'll explain why. But the rocker sole is a really good innovation. It works beautifully for any of those joints that are in that saddle plane. So like your first MTP, so your big toe joint, any of your toe joints really, your midfoot, your ankle, your knee, and your hip, it makes it easier to use those joints to move forward. So you're not getting as much load through those joints. The other shoes have done it better in that they don't have the rocker at the back. They only have the rocker at the front. So what I find when people are in the Hokers, they've got that rocker at the back, it sort of tips their center of mass back a little bit. And what happens is when you're kind of in your center of mass is posterior, then your anterior chain starts to fire up. So your shin muscles, your quads, everything's kind of stopping you from falling backwards. So that in itself is one of my big bugbears, and it's something that I'm constantly trying to help people shift their center of mass and their posture so that they're able to utilize their posterior chain better. So the rear foot rocker kind of forces them back, which is not a good thing. But the other shoes that have that stack and then they have that forefoot rocker actually work really nicely. So I'm all for the rocker. I just don't love the really soft foam at the moment. So there's a few brands that are doing the really soft foam.
Yeah, definitely. It's like even just getting the boys yesterday, like they were trying to squat, and some of them are still wearing they've come off season, so they're wearing those shoes, and you can just see their feet are moving around everywhere while they're loading, and bare feet, I think, unless they
100%. Yeah, I think if you've overall got the conditioning, barefoot's 100% going to be better than being in a big foamy shoe. Or in like a lifting shoe like a Metcon or a Nano or something like that, where you've got that stability on the ground with a little bit of pitch. But yes, they will, the really soft foam will just make you sort of wobble too much.
Yeah. It's like you're standing on those little mini Bosu balls or something.
Yeah, it is. It's literally, like a foam balance mat.
Phone's balance mat, yeah. What about the carbon? That the boys seem to be quite high praise of the carbon for their joggers.
Well, so the carbon is going to be so the rocker sole. So that the way that the rocker sole works is kind of like the carbon, just a little bit more robust, and they're built more for mileage, right? So if you're running higher distances, your standard non-carbon rocker sole shoes are probably going to be your better bet. If you're on race day, your carbons are going to make you quicker, right? But they're going to make you work harder. So there's less stability in the carbon plated shoes. They kick in. So you'll find in the standard rocker sole shoes, like your Asics Nimbus or your Brooks Glycerin Max or Ghost Max, they have a really wide, stable base on them, whereas a lot of the carbon plated shoes really kick in quite narrowly at that midfoot. So they really aren't nearly as stable as a lot of the other shoes, but they're lighter. They're quicker, but you want to be doing more of either your race day or your short, sharp sprint type form running in the carbon plated shoes, and they're going to last you not nearly as long. Like their longevity in them is minimal compared to the more standard shoes.
Okay.
Yeah. But yes, they definitely have a cool place in from a technology point of view in performance.
Yeah. And what about in terms of foot intrinsic, like strength work dedicated? Yes, specifically the foot ankle sort of complex area. What are some of your, I guess, most common exercises you prescribe or focus areas for athletes these days, or those that wear, your footballers, I guess?
Yes. So my go-to would be testing their intrinsics. So looking at particularly their toe flexors. So like I said before, my whole thing is about creating a spring. So we want you to be able to hit the ground and spring off using the flexor muscles rather than pulling up with the extensor muscles. So we want to kind of get that, hit the ground and push off rather than pull up. So a lot of the time people are using more of their extensors to pull up. So I will test, I'll get my finger underneath their big toe and get them to push into my finger as hard as they can without gripping, right? So we used to give toe gripping exercises. We grip enough. We don't want to grip. We want to use our toe grippers as our second line of stability. So if you're on unstable ground or you've absolutely cooked your primary stabilizers because you're fatigued, that's when you want to have your gripping form, but you don't want to go straight into your grip form. So when I'm testing people, I'll have a look at their toe strength, make sure that they're keeping their toe nice and straight. So they're not gripping with the tips of the toes, but they're also not ski dipping. So where you're getting more load through that IP joint and nothing through the tip of the toe. So we want to have it. So I test that out, and I like, if they're sort of sitting around a 7 out of 10, and 10 I say is like, it's going to blow your finger off. Like some people are really strong in their toe flexors. So if they're that level, they don't need to do it, right? But most people, athlete or not, will have quite poor intrinsic foot strength. So I'll do their big toe and then I'll do their other four toes, because you've got one muscle that supports your big toe and the other muscle supports the other four toes. So I'll test them and then I give them that exercise actually to do themselves. So they sit with their demonstrate, but so sit with their own finger underneath their toe and push their toe into their finger. So they're always going to get a higher score when they're doing it themselves, because they're getting a nice feedback loop back to their brain. So their brain goes, oh, okay, I can actually feel how this is supposed to work, and they can do it properly with better power. Whereas when it's with me, they're not getting that feedback loop. So I always account for that, and I do that, get them to do that with their big toe, and then I get them to do it with their other four toes. They sort of stick their hand underneath their other four toes and press into their other four toes. And so the whole idea of this is really working on getting your toes to work properly first and foremost, and then secondly, getting some power. But you can't get the power without the good form. So we start with really working through getting the toes to articulate properly, getting them to work properly, then starting to get more of that 7, 8 out of 10. Once they're at that 7 or 8 out of 10, then we can start to bring in more of the TheraBands or rubber bands or, any kind of band work. But you don't want to be doing the band work without having that real sort of intrinsic knowledge about how to actually activate the toes properly. But then the other part of that is I've just done a pilot study with the Giants netball exactly on this. So getting them, we tested everybody, the whole team, and then we had a control group and we had our intervention group. And so I gave them a 6-week intrinsic foot program, and we got all of them stronger. So it doesn't take very long to actually get things to start to fire up. But what we're hopefully about to do is sort of see how that then starts to translate into like their vertical jump and that sort of, more of the performance metrics. And my thing is, like I work, like I said, with a lot of tennis players, and our calf strength overall in tennis players is extremely poor. And so doing calf exercises properly, where they're actually using their toes on the ground and utilizing that nice integration between the calf and the foot intrinsics is key. So there's no point doing your calf raise. They're not scrunching. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of athletes that where they do a calf raise and they're gripping, they can't use their calves properly without, having this sort of secondary sort of kick in of all their toe grippers. So my whole thing is, okay, let's pull back your range. Let's pull back your loading, get you doing them properly. As you build up that strength, you'll be able to go higher without the toe gripping. Then we can add in more loading and just get things working properly. That's when we really start to get things like your pogos and your vertical jump and all of that really working beautifully. Whereas if you don't kind of unravel things first, you just feed the beast the whole time. It's one of those, there needs to be that nice connection, but there also needs to be that training and that technique and working on that technique.
Is there trends with the toe crunches? Like maybe you wear thongs a lot, or is it what? Or is that just something that just some people do? They're not strong enough or haven't been trained?
Most people do it. So definitely wearing thongs will make it worse. So anything without a back on it, you have to grip your toes to hold the shoe on. So like a backless, I wear mules to work. Like I'm constantly using my toes to grip it on. And same with thongs. So in a way, you're better off going barefoot than in a thong because you don't want to overload those toe grippers. I think the other thing that's important to recognize with this is when people are naturally more grippy, their extensors become really overactive and tight. And so actually working on their extensor length first before we can actually get into their toe flexors, again, unraveling, going back to that far and working on it. So see if I can get my thing to show you how to do this, but a really good stretch is just literally doing a ballerina stretch. So just hang on, sorry if I can get that to work. My thing's wanting to follow me. So it doesn't want to do it. But ballerina stretch, so using your hand to pull down on your toes and just pulling it into that point form so that you're getting that really nice stretch across your extensors and through the front of your shin. And you can sort of change the angle of your ankles so that you've got some more on that perineal. So if you pull more towards your ear, your opposite ear, you're going to get more on your perineals. If you pull more down towards the floor, you're going to get more through the top of your foot. But really working on that, because if you don't unravel that first, you're never going to get your intrinsics firing properly. So, and then, they're all the sorts of, I think from an optimal foot function perspective, like if you're constantly in your secondary stabilizing grippers, you can't get through your first and second toe, and vice versa. If you don't have that good calf strength, then you're going to grip. So you kind of just need to work on that whole I guess kinetic chain and getting everything to kind of sequence properly. It's all about the sequencing of it.
And I imagine then a lot of your prescriptions done barefoot then to train that and get that, actually visually see if they're gripping.
Yes. Yeah. If they're not in pain. Yeah. So if they're in pain and we have to have them in their shoes, we do, like, I'll show them how to do it. Like I spent a lot of my time teaching people how to do a proper calf raise and working out where their level is at. So, if they can't do it at this range, we drop the range. If they can't do it with this load, we drop the load. We drop the reps, whatever it is we need to do to kind of get them working it properly, and then we build in from there. And absolutely, I'd have them doing it barefoot if we can.
In the sort of high performance environment where you do have access to technology, do you like testing with a force frame on the big toe strength and the four toes, or?
Yeah. So that's how we measured it with the Giants. We used the force frame with the valve technology. It's hard because you can't produce a huge amount of newtons through your big toe, and like most people can't. So we had some really low sort of newtons that it's hard to pick up. So I know that the Australian Ballet did first toe and fifth toe. When they did it, we did first toe and other four toes together. And so the way that we sort of structured that was I sort of taught them how to do it properly first, then we measured it on the force frame. But when you do it properly, you're getting less power output because it's, you know, you're spending a lot of your it's more about the technique, and it's harder to get the power output when you're doing it properly. But once you get the technique right, then you can get more power output. So that was definitely the trend that we saw with our pre and post intervention.
And are there like research standards, you know, out there
With
for
how to do it on the force frame?
yeah, like, you know, relative strength compared to their body weight or something along those lines, or is it not
Good
something
question.
you can do?
We looked into that before we did our study, and I am trying to remember what the research was. I don't think so. No, not compared to body weight. It was the research that we sort of looked at prior to doing that study was they had found that good intrinsic foot strength increased your power. I think it was your power output by 30%, which we were kind of like, that's a lot. And it was, and I don't know whether that necessarily was kind of where we got to. We've still got to, you know, sort of look at the rest of the more of the global pogo vertical jump type results, which we haven't done yet. But I don't think it needs to all come together. So your foot strength, yes, but you can do a good pogo without good intrinsic foot strength. But you will do a better pogo with good intrinsic foot strength and good form, right? So that's probably more where I sort of sit with it. The jury's out on that one a little bit, I think.
Yep. And we've had GLB Medley has sent in a question, or sort of a question / comment. I switched to a barefoot shoes a couple of years ago and found great benefits. Alas, in recent weeks, I seem to have a case of heel spurs in one foot. Any thoughts? Welcome.
Yeah. So it's common. So whether or not it's a heel spur or whether it's plantar fasciitis or it's a combination of both, sometimes you can have some fat pad bruising as well. The barefoot shoes. So the barefoot shoes were originally more of like the Vibram style shoes, which were the what they called 5 fingers. Now any shoe that has more of a zero drop is considered a barefoot shoe, even though a lot of them now have a bit of a stack on them. Certainly I would be looking at something with more of a stack on it. If you wanted to continue with the barefoot style, the stack is going to give you more cushioning. The biggest thing with your barefoot shoes is there's just that lack of cushioning. You don't have any protection underneath your heel. You have to have really good conditioning through your calf and your probably your intrinsic, what we've just discussed with the intrinsic foot strength as well, good intrinsic foot strength, because just because you're using that shoe doesn't necessarily mean that you've got good intrinsic foot strength. It's going to help for sure, but you still need to actually activate those muscles to get them firing properly. So my thought would be don't leave it too long to manage it though, because it can grumble away and it can be quite a pain. It might be that you may need a little bit more heel pitch, and you can put like a nice heel raise into a shoe just for a little bit of offset to begin with, to give that heel a little bit more pitch and support and padding, but probably need some, I guess, more specific advice around it. But yeah, if it's a spur, it needs to be offloaded. So we use a donut heel padding to create some offloading through the heel spur. But if it's not a spur, if it's more along the lines of plantar fasciitis, then it's probably a little bit better support to begin with might be a good idea. But yeah, some more specific advice, or it's not particularly specific.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, book in a session at Biomechanics.
Yeah. Physio or sports podiatrist would be the way to go with that one.
What about when you're looking at biomechanics, like you mentioned earlier, when you were studying, that's like a passion of yours. I guess with the running gait, whether it be acceleration or upright running, do we want a fair amount of movement in the foot? Like you're talking about some natural supination, rolling into pronation to toe off. Do we
Mhm.
want these days? Is there too much movement going on with athletes that you're seeing, and we're actually trying to create a bit more stability, or
Mm.
is all
So
different courses?
everybody's different. So if you're more on that hypermobile scale, or you've got a lot of mobility, we need more stability coming from muscles. So your muscles need to work harder to create that stability. And your shoes probably need to be more stable. When you've got more of a um, sort of more rigid foot type where you don't have a lot of range of movement, then we probably need more shock absorption coming from the shoe, possibly working on more mobility if we can. So some joints just don't want to move. So that's just the way that we're made. But sometimes we can increase the mobility through mobilization and through, exercises, that sort of thing. So definitely trying to, uh, my whole thing is kind of like keeping people within that nice middle zone. So if we've got too much of something, kind of just trying to improve their stability. If we've got not enough of something, trying to improve their mobility, trying to get more back in that sort of middle zone as much as we possibly can. You know, talking about big toe joints, they're really important for a good, efficient propulsion. So if you are tight through your plantar fascia and through your FHL, which is the tendon that comes into your big toe, if you're tight through there, then creating more mobility and flexibility through there is going to really improve the functional mobility. But if you've got an actual joint that doesn't want to move particularly well, then sometimes we just need to work with that as well. So, and there's ways around that. Like there's not usually many things that we can go, okay, well, we can't do too much about that. So, yeah, it's sometimes it's about getting pretty creative and just, putting the pieces of the puzzle together and working through it. But yeah, my thought would be if you're more on the increased mobility, more stability. If you don't have as much mobility, we want to try and, improve that as much as we can functionally.
So for the mobile athletes, the shoes that you're talking about a bit earlier, where um, they're real cushiony, so there's a lot of variation, so you know instability.
Yes.
But I imagine they would gravitate towards them potentially if they've got quite flat mobile feet. They feel like they need more support in terms of a thick heel or lots of cushion. Is that not the case?
Yeah, so they would be going for more of that wider last that I was talking about, where so we don't want to kind of kick in too far. So having more stability within the shoe, where the wider you are through that midfoot, the better.
Yep.
So generally, what you want when you've got a lot of mobility is something that has got, like, we still want to have, like, I say soft but not too soft. So they're all soft these days. You just don't want the too soft. So if you're pushing it and it just keeps on going, it's like a marshmallow. They're too soft. So generally, the Brooks and the Asics are doing it best at the moment. So as far as soft but not too soft. Um, then there's different styles of shoes within those ranges where they've got more stability or less stability, or more geometry in the shoe. So there's going to be shoes that have a little bit more built into them with a bit more stability. They're going to be people who overpronate. They're going to be people who are more mobile, whereas your higher arch feet want to have more shock absorption. So they're going to be more of a neutral shoe. So they're going to be quite balanced on the inside and the outside part of the shoe. So we're not trying to push somebody one way or the other. It's just we're giving you nice shock absorption, is usually how it works. And then we can work within the shoe to then create what people need with something that's more customized to them if we need to do that with an orthotic device of some description. Yeah. Particularly if people have got pain ongoing, if they've had sort of recurring issues, or they've had an issue for a period of time, probably more than sort of 4 or 5 weeks, and things aren't improving, then that's certainly where we can start to step in with things that are a little bit more customized.
And for the FHL release and plantar fascia
Mm-hmm.
tightness for the rigid foot, what's some of your go-tos to release those?
Yeah. So rolling on the tennis ball, frozen water bottle, that sort of thing. Releasing it yourself so you can actually get in. It's in the front. I don't know whether it's going to do it again, but sort of get sitting, same sort of thing, sitting with your legs up like figure four and really getting into that inside part of your shin. So it's kind of like kneading bread. So getting that muscle tissue to start to release, getting a good massage, somebody who knows what they're doing as far as some soft tissue release. And then I like a kind of like an active sort of calf raise, but so you're kind of in a split step, like you're going into a calf stretch, so a knee straight calf stretch, so a gastroc stretch, but then you're loading up onto your first and second toe and back down again nice and slowly. So you're sort of working through that first MTP joint range of movement, but with really good control of the FHL, and it works the fascia. You can do it with a towel underneath your toes, but I like having feet, like my whole thing is keep your toes on the ground. We want to be pushing into the ground and really working against the ground. Whereas when you start to put towels on the toes, sometimes it starts to load you more through that anterior chain, through the extensors. So we want to make sure that we're always got the toes moving towards the ground, but not in a grip form.
Sure.
Yeah. So they're probably my go-to. Bit of self-release, self-mobilization through the big toe, but I probably wouldn't be prescribing those without making sure somebody's got enough range of movement first. Yeah.
Last one, what are some common mistakes, do you think, with foot management with footballers, I guess, these days?
Yeah. I think probably the big thing is people put up with things for too long. Like they sort of see it as, okay, it'll just get better, or oh, this is just a part of playing footy, or and it sort of goes from a grumble to to something that is kind of then starts to really impact their performance. And then that can mean that we then, to help manage that, we have to kind of like pull a little bit of that back sometimes, not always. But I think probably not getting on top of things earlier, not doing the strength work properly. I see a lot of people who just like load through their calves really heavy, but just really don't take notice of that actual form. So footy boots is also a big one. Like there's some crappy footy boots out there. And so choosing something that's got better structure, fits you well, has enough depth, has enough width for you. A lot of footy players are massive. They have wide feet, big feet. So choosing a shoe that kind of fits properly, your Nikes are probably fairly typically a little bit more narrow. Your Asics are going to be a bit wider. So just, choosing footwear that's going to suit you from a performance point of view and help you in the future, as well as during your what's right in front of you, so you don't end up with problems, would probably be the other thing. And getting the help early for sure. Like one of the good things about being in a elite football environment is you've got all of that gets picked up, right? But when you've got somebody who's playing Sunday footy, people put up with stuff. So it's really, I think the main thing is it's not normal to have pain. It's normal to have DOMS, like you've used your legs, but it's not normal to have pain. So, and particularly pain in the mornings after a game, that's not normal. First few steps out of bed, first few steps, if you're sitting and you're getting back up again, that's not normal. They're all things to get on top of. And then also night pain is a big one. So if you're asleep and it's waking you up at night, you need to get it looked at.
With the footwear, like football boots, do you feel like they're designed for optimal sort of foot function and performance in mind, or is it more aesthetics, or where's the sway there?
No, it's more for the game. I think it's more for the pitch. It's more for your pivoting and getting your grip on the ground. It's not so much for foot function. It's more for the demands of the sport, I would say. And so, even basketball, tennis, there's so much money that goes into the technology in these shoes, and you're still choosing the best of a bad bunch, right? None of them really are good shoes. So that's where I think particularly like running shoes, I think is a little bit of a different story. I think there's some really good shoes out there, but more with your specific sports shoes. Um, it's more about getting the shoe that's most comfortable for you, maybe choosing the shoe sometimes that's not the prettiest but is better structured, has better cushioning, and isn't maybe necessarily the colors that you want but is going to do the best for you, and then adding in something that's customized if need be. So that's where that you get that best form, is where you've got something that's kind of made for you. So it's any sports shoe, cleats, cycling cleats, boxing boots. They're all really not made for feet. They're made for the sport.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. You need to then make sure that you've got the conditioning around that to make sure that your foot and your legs and that whole kinetic chain is able to do what it needs to do, within the context of the sport, but also for your body and for your foot type and all of that.
These two questions are more outside of the topic, but you can relate them to the topic if you like. But what is one opinion or belief that you hold that sort of goes against mainstream thinking or challenges popular consensus?
Yeah. So I guess from a foot function point of view, I guess, and it's sort of less about this now because people have kind of caught up, but I think pronation is an important part of foot function, and that's what allows us to create that shock absorption and spring and engage the foot properly. Whereas there's still lots of fear around pronation, and it's so. I think that's the main thing is there's a lot of people that actually do need to pronate. So people who roll out, we need to get them in towards their big toe. So that's probably the main one that I think where I kind of sit a little bit differently to a lot of podiatrists. And it's mostly because I've kind of grown up, if you like, with physios, and my cohort has been physio sports doctors, and that's what I've been mostly influenced by. And so I've kind of don't really subscribe to the more of the mainstream podiatry sort of thought patterns. I mean, I did a symposium the other week with some podiatrists, and I think we figured out at the end of the day, we kind of more or less come sort of to the same conclusion, just with completely different philosophies.
Yeah, right.
So it's, and that is because a lot of it has caught up these days, whereas I would have been very different to others 10 years ago.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Biomechanics has been open for 12 months now. We're at the pointy end of 2025 of this recording, like early December. Yes. What are you most excited about for next year, 2026?
Ooh. So I'm doing the Aussie Swing in January. So I've got 4 tournaments there, and then I'm off to Miami this year. So I'm doing, every year we do physicals for the WTA. So every athlete has to come through and have their physicals done for the year. It's quite an incredible organization as far as what we're able to offer our athletes. So I will be a part of that, which is very cool. And then I think I'll see how the year rolls out. I might be able to do a couple more tournaments towards the end of the year, but nothing too. I've got Bangara and the Giants, and just some cool things. Things always pop up. Which is nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Emily, for jumping on with us and sharing with us your journey. Optimizing foot health for a range of different populations, and also for providing some great tips, actionable tips for athletes or those working with athletes to, I guess, look after your feet and how to optimize your foot function to not only help your performance but hopefully help your availability for the future seasons. For those that want to connect or maybe some follow-up questions, where's the best place to connect?
Ooh. So our Instagram is at Biomechanica. I think it's _AU, or not, might be .au. I think it's _AU. Otherwise, email. if I'm happy to give out my email, Emily at biomechanico.au. So yeah, I'm happy to connect anytime.
Fantastic. We'll add both email address as well as Emily's Instagram to our clinic in the show notes. So you guys, if you're listening to the podcast recording, driving the car, wherever you might be, you'll be able to find it there
Beautiful.
at your choosing. Our next live chat is with Greg King, which will be 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, Thursday, the 18th of December. So I look forward to seeing you guys then.